Well, it's good to have you with us here at NAMPO Virtual. Hope you're enjoying the expo so far. I'm Tony Ndoro. It's time for me to have a one-on-one chat with Chris Venter, who is former CEO of Afri Group Holdings in South Africa. Just want to find out what makes him tick. Chris, are you well?
I'm well, thanks, Tony.
Fantastic. Good to have you with us. Let's just start maybe about 7 months ago when you resigned as the CEO of Afri Group Holdings after 11 long years. What was your main motivation for leaving that behind?
Look, for me, it was always, so I have a specific purpose in life, I believe. And, when you get to the end of a period, end of a journey, then it's time to start a new journey.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it was almost that, 11 years is a long time as a group CEO, so it takes a lot out of you and your family.
Yeah.
It was time for me to take a little bit perspective and step back a bit and, look at what I can do. I have a huge passion for food security.
Yeah.
I've driven a lot of actions, and some of my dreams through the Afri network and structure, and I had great support from the shareholders. So it was time for me to step backwards and decide, how can I do more, maybe outside of one group.
It's interesting you say how you can do more, because when you look at Afri Holdings, Group Holdings, when you started off to the point where you're resigning now, the company grew exponentially. So you achieved quite a lot.
I have, but it also takes a lot, I have achieved, in a sense, I must just say, it's not really me. There's always a team. I had a huge amount of fantastic people around me, So credit to all of them. I think for me it was more just the time was right to look broader, The thing is, what you need to remember is always when you sit into a specific environment, that environment will always limit you to certain things, and the ideals of dreaming, the old saying of your dreams must scare you, is one of the things that I believe in. So, and when you get to that point where you feel you have to look elsewhere and have to do more, then it's the time is right. So I'm excited where I am now. The time was absolutely perfect for me. There's wonderful people in the group which I will always support. So for me, it was great.
Your dreams must scare you, but it's an amazing feeling when you actually achieve them, isn't it?
It is, but it's a lot of people that make them successful, make them possible.
100%. You mentioned family as well right at the beginning. It was one of the reasons. Family is very important to you, isn't it?
Yeah, I have 4 children. They're all different ages, 3 boys and a girl. If I'm blessed, to be quite honest, I have a wonderful wife. It's something you never really realize how much your family gives up, especially obviously your wife. When you get to that position where almost every second of a day is expected of you to be part of a group. And Afri has grown a lot in Australia, so you get into that mode where you almost on call, every second. And I suppose that's part of the job. But I think the one thing that I enjoyed was always time with the family. So it's definitely something I enjoy.
What sort of things do you do with family? You go fishing?
So I have a daughter who enjoyed dance and ballet. I have children who love sport and ice hockey. Funny enough, we lived a couple of years in the States, so if they picked it up there, they came back, they play ice hockey for the club and for our country. So I enjoy their sport. I enjoy hunting a little bit, but I'm not someone that will only focus on myself. For me, it's not that I have my own hobbies. My hobbies is to really visit and enjoy my children's, their sport activities and spend time with my wife and them. So that's really it.
100%. All right. You also mentioned the passion, and that's a key word for you, isn't it? Passion in everything that you do. There must be a vision. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I strongly believe in generational investments, and when you look at making a difference, you need to look long term, 50, 80 years, and across generations. So for me, food security is my passion. I was in merchant banking for almost 14 years, and from there joined Afri in 2005. So in that time, even in merchant banking, in New York, my focus was food commodities and movement or financing food commodities across the country, across the world actually. So it was interesting for me to be able to come into South Africa, or to come back to South Africa and live out that passion in Afri, and now even further in my new entity. But when you do that, Tony, it's something that makes you wake up every morning, that you can feel you need to make a difference. If you think about South Africa currently, we probably produce about 16 million tons of grain every year in a good year. In 2050, everybody's saying there's going to be 1 billion people more on the continent. So the question in South Africa, if we go from, let's say, 55, 60 million people to 80 million people, 85 million people, how is our food going to come from? Are we going to become net importers? In some commodities, we are already net importers. But how do we look after what we leave behind for our children and their children? And that is, for me, food security. And certain structural changes needs to happen, and certain supports needs to happen for our farmers to be able to produce, that amount of food. And unfortunately, it goes in the opposite direction. If you look at commercial farms in South Africa, we've gone from 70,000, 80,000 commercial farmers to 30,000. So there's a bit of a support base that needs to happen. There's a bit of change. Everybody talks about digital. So it's interesting.
Does that worry you on a personal level that we gone down from the numbers that you spoke to me about, the reduction in commercial farmers? Does that worry you on a personal level?
Yes and no. I think what worries me is obviously the climate change and the fact that we're losing farmland, and production land. I think the fact that we lose commercial farmers is a big concern. We have seen a lot of consolidation of farmers, so farmers becoming bigger. So that's a worldwide trend when you see, farmers being taken over by other farmers, or buying the neighbor's farm. I think in South Africa and in Africa, we need to find a way to support the small-scale farmer, because that's where food security in Africa comes from, having that balance between supporting small-scale and having commercial farmers. And the one is as important as the other one. It's not one more important than the other one.
Right.
So it is an important process, but I think the worry for me is when we start to reduce our production land, and that goes by the wayside, and we lose farmers farming on that land. That's a big concern.
What I'm hearing from you, Chris, is that yes, we want to achieve food security, but also do it with compassion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Correct?
Yeah.
How do you think we can do that?
I think it's, for starters, understanding the lay of the land, if I can say that, in a sense that there are certain uniquenesses with regards to South Africa and the way that our structures are, just our history of the country, and I think we need to embrace that. And also I think we need to embrace the current farmers, so, it's one of those things you can't do away. It's almost like a rugby team, you referred to the Blue Bulls earlier, having a good team. But bringing in youngsters, with the older guys who understands you have been to many World Cups before, so you need those people in your environment, but bringing up that youngsters, whether it's a small-scale farmer, I think the compassion goes around how do you support them. Because for a young farmer with no background to get a piece of land and start to farm is just impossible. So that's
you have a background working in financial institutions, Standard Bank and ABSA as well. From a commercial point of view, moving away from government, is that support sufficient? Is there appetite to support the new and upcoming farmers, small-scale farmers as well?
Yeah, I don't think it's sufficient, because I think various models are tried. There's some actually very good work done by the agricultural companies. There's a lot of good work done by commercial farmers themselves and mega farmers. So, but I think the difficulty is finding the cash and the cash flow for those farmers to start, or just to buy inputs, for specific year. If you don't have the economies of scale, it becomes very difficult for a small farmer, So it is something that one needs to look at the model. I know that through work that Ruth Meyer is doing and the Agricultural Development Agency, they're looking at ways of supporting that and changing that in future. But it should be a holistic approach.
100%. Okay. I just want to get back to your personal approach. Faith is very important to you. It's key in everything you do. Am I correct to say that?
It is. I mean, I'm a Christian, and I believe that the Lord has made me with a purpose, and that I need to live out that purpose. For me, it was interesting. I started with Standard Merchant Bank in '92, and in '94, I actually came out of a discussion about a raise. And I was, I had a good race, but a good race of nothing is nothing. But I think when I walked out, that was almost a defining moment for me, because in my faith, I almost felt, a word saying to me, but I work for the Lord, and I will always have to. He will look after me. So I never really, after that, I never worried about payment or bonuses or anything. For me, it was always, okay, now how do you take that forward? If I'm here to really do what I believe the Lord tells me to do, then payment is less of a concern. So it really changed my focus and direction to, okay, now what do I do next? And prayer comes obviously as a big part of that. So a lot of the things that I do, even when we had the delisting in Afri in 2014, that was a huge prayer process for me to understand, okay, what does the Lord want to do with Afri? Because I do believe that for Him, people is important, and to reach people, you need companies and you need support structures, and that's important. And how do we create those structures, and what is my role in creating those structures?
That's very interesting how, what you're saying here, because you're talking about the delisting of such a huge entity. And for you, it was important that you made that decision through faith. But you also have a board that's sitting there, and you're also looking at the numbers that are, employed. You almost have to marry the two, and everybody has to, buy into the vision that you have. Do they buy into your process at all? Do you have to convince them?
Well, in a listed environment, obviously the board makes the final decision. Well, in all companies, but I'm just saying in listed environment even more so, because it's a much more defined process, and it's a public process. So, so you have to engage shareholders at the early stage. So yeah, I mean, obviously for me, the prayer process was even upfront, even before going to the board and to the shareholders, because it was almost understanding for myself whether that is something that needs to happen. In a group like Afri, which is in context as a listed entity, probably not massive, but I mean, it is still a big company with, and I think it's for me, it was always important to make sure that at least what I'm going to drive and what I'm going to believe in and stand for is I need to have faith and understanding that is almost the process that needs to follow. So in the Lord's eyes, it's not something that's just a good idea for me. It's something that I prayed about, and I felt, okay, this is what needs to happen. And then I will take it to shareholders and to the board. And I mean, there's obviously discussions, but I must say in that process, I never really had a negative approach to it. It was always, okay, how do we do this? What needs to happen? What is the process? Because there's always governance process that one needs to follow. Yeah,
very true. Purpose. That's a word you've used more than one time, in the last few minutes that we've been talking. It's almost like it's critical for you to have that purpose, which basically is, what's the difference for you between the vision and the purpose?
I think
because you could have your own vision, which may not be your purpose. How do you marry that?
Yeah, well,
it's a tough one.
No, it is a tough one. I think that so for me, the two are very much integral to one another. So I think you get to a point where you're excited to live out your purpose, which is part of your vision. So obviously in a corporate environment, you need to define the vision better. To say, okay, where do you want to be in 10 years or 15 years, and how are you going to achieve that? And purpose, for me, is sometimes broken down in more detail, because when I look at the company, I would love to look at a 50-year, as I mentioned earlier, generational vision, rather than the worst thing for any company is to start something and then when you leave, everything else change, because it means that the purpose, the vision of the group must be long-term. It's interesting for me, I had visitors from China in 2009, 2010, 11. And they had a specific view and approach to Africa and what they wanted to do with companies like Afri, or being a part of companies like Afri. And I think that they already, in those discussions, it became clear that they had a 50-year, 100-year plan on how they see themselves and looking after their nations. And I think sometimes we lack that, and I think your purpose is maybe shorter term. And sometimes you look at it on a shorter term basis, but it should be part of your vision.
Food security, that is your passion, and ultimately, I suppose, to some extent, that is your vision. You want to achieve food security, and we're looking at the African continent here, not just from a South African point of view. How far away do you think we are, and holistically, are we heading in the right direction?
I'm not sure if we're prepared for 50 or 100 years from now in terms of food security, because I think we still have issues. So our focus is not driven by food security as a nation. Our focus is driven by historical correctness, which is right, and one needs to do that as well. So I'm not saying that shouldn't happen. I'm just saying that I think there should be a greater plan that consolidates everything that we're doing now into that sole focus. Eastern Cape, we know, is rich of rain and potential of grain production. So we know already that we're losing parts in the center of South Africa because of drought or years or climate change. So the fact, the question is, looking forward, how is that going to change, and are we ready for that? And I'm just not sure, if we are.
Okay. You mentioned you've got a little bit more time now that you're not at the helm of Afri anymore.
Yeah.
Sport.
Yeah.
What's your favorite sport?
So rugby. I grew up rugby being my favorite sport. I was a big part of Afri sponsoring Bulls. So for me that is a passion. But I must say, obviously with a house of children who love sport, we watch soccer. I'm a big Man United fan, so...
I'm sorry.
So, obviously a big Blue Bulls fan, so it's, we believe this year's going to be better.
You're like an Arsenal fan. It'll always be better at the Blue Bulls. Listen, you've got Jake White now. Does that change anything for you?
Yeah, Jake White, I think he brought in fantastic people. I'm a big fan of Arnold Aribota, so I'm a big fan of Dwayne. So obviously lots of good people coming in. So we hope this year's going to be a better year.
It's going to be better year. Do you go to the stadiums and watch?
I will. I do. I enjoy it. I enjoy to go with my children. And then we obviously, as I said, ice hockey. So we do watch a lot of ice hockey and basketball and any team that you can think of.
That's
we struggle with balls.
I struggle with the fact
but
that
anything else we will watch.
Some of these, I don't even think bowls is a sport. So some of these things should not be called a sporting event of any nature. You mentioned, you gave that example of the Bulls and Jake White. You're bringing in a lot of young players, sort of a lot of older players, maybe to fuse in with the younger players. And you can assume that what he's hoping is that experience gets passed on to the younger. Younger players, and that can also, when you look at your life and the experience you have as well, you almost have that same obligation, don't you?
I do. I mean, and I think, I suppose, when you get into the age where you have experience and you can share that, you should do that. So
I'm not saying you're old, by the way.
You are, but I mean, it's okay. I'm not worried about that, so that's fine.
That's fine.
I call it experience, not old, but it's nice to share that. I mean, it's obviously, I don't see it as an obligation. I see it as a part of life. We almost hand all over to generations. And almost help them to learn what you've learned, or to understand, or get it, get a little bit of that extra knowledge which they don't have to work for as hard. But
you had to throw that in.
Absolutely, But I enjoy to do that.
Your door is always open. For that.
I love mentorship and bringing in young people. Absolutely.
Okay, your passion in agriculture. What's next for you now?
So I created Sovereign Capital Holdings, which is an investment company specifically focused on looking at food security. So hopefully investing in companies that makes food security happen. I love the digital environment. I learn every day a lot about the digital environment. So we actually working to launch online market for farmers, you know, that we'll talk about a little bit later as well. And that's exciting, you know, it's exciting for me.
When you say an online market for farmers, it's selling my goods, my produce online.
This one is to provide everything that they need to produce. Okay. I'm also involved in and done investment and actually food distribution online. So, you know, for the farmers to be able to move their product directly to the plate, sort of thing. You know, so I like the digital environment. I like the storage. You know, storage for me as a faith person is critical for food security across Africa. So that's a big focus. And then, you know, an old passion of mine is financing. How do you finance the production of food? You know, so yeah. I mean, that's my life. I enjoy it.
It's a new adventure. It's something that you really want to do. Yeah. It's within the same space, but is it giving you kind of like a new lease on life? You know, you're learning new things. Is that what you really were looking for?
And probably, you know, dreaming a bit bigger. You know, in a sense of when you're in a specific environment, you obviously get limited in terms of what that environment can provide. You know, so being out of that and not having 7,000 people reporting to you every day, you know, you have the time to dream a little bit, you know, and that's why the lockdown for me was actually good, because it was almost a little bit of time to reflect again and, you know, to get some more rest, sleep more than 4 or 5 hours a night. So, and then, and then to think and to dream of how the future should look like. So.
I can see you reading a book during lockdown. What sort of books do you read?
Well, I read more spiritual books. I mean, an old favorite of mine is The Power of Faith, which is Smith Wigglesworth, who lived in the 18th century. So I do like to read. I like financial books, you know, but and biographies primarily. So. Yeah.
All right, fantastic, Chris. Fantastic speaking with you, and good luck in your new venture. And you've got your vision, and you keep going at it.
Thank you very much, Tony. Appreciate the time.
Fantastic stuff. That's Chris Venter. You all know him as a former CEO of Afri Group Holdings, resigned about 7 months ago, a little bit earlier on this year, into a new chapter in his life. And he's also hoping, as you heard, that the Blue Bulls also on a new chapter in their existence. We can only dream.